Your neck, your jaw, and even your skin may be showing signs of high cortisol right now. Cortisol is one of your most important hormones. It wakes you up in the morning, sharpens your focus under pressure, helps you recover from illness, and gives you the energy to handle everything the day throws at you. The problem is that the same system was designed for short bursts. A threat appears, cortisol rises, you respond, and cortisol falls. That is the cycle your body was built for. When cortisol stays elevated day after day, week after week, it stops being a survival tool and becomes a slow source of damage. Let's start with a symptom that affects more people than you'd imagine and is constantly misdiagnosed: acne on the chin and jawline. If you've been dealing with breakouts specifically on your chin and jawline, and they keep coming back, regardless of what cleanser, cream, or diet you try, there's a good chance you're treating the symptom while completely ignoring the cause. When cortisol rises, it sends a direct signal to the skin's sebaceous glands, the ones responsible for producing oil. The instruction is simple: produce more. In short bursts, this isn't a disaster, but when cortisol is chronically elevated, those glands go into overproduction. The result is a constant excess of sebum that clogs pores, traps bacteria, and creates the perfect conditions for persistent inflammatory acne. Now, the next sign is easy to dismiss: constant facial redness. Most people assume it's just their skin type, sensitivity, or something to be managed with the right products. Some spend years trying to figure out which food is causing it. Others simply accept it as part of their appearance. But there is a specific type of facial redness that is not a skin condition. It's vascular, and cortisol is usually behind it. Cortisol keeps the body in a state of low-grade physiological alertness. Part of that response causes the blood vessels near the skin's surface, especially on the face, to remain slightly more dilated than they should be, unlike redness caused by exercise, heat, or embarrassment, which comes and goes. Cortisol-driven redness tends to be baseline. It's there in the morning. It's there after a calm day. It doesn't need an external trigger, because the trigger is internal and constant. The cheeks, nose, and forehead are the most affected areas, simply because they have a higher density of superficial capillaries. And because chronic inflammation accompanies elevated cortisol, the skin in those areas may also become more sensitive and more reactive to temperature changes, wind, or even touch. Now let's talk about something that truly disrupts your daily life: excessive sweating for no apparent reason. You're sitting at your desk. The room isn't hot. You haven't moved, and you're sweating. Or you wake up in the middle of the night with damp sheets for no obvious reason. No fever, no illness, just sweat. This is one of the signs people find most embarrassing and confusing, and it often goes unexplained for years. The connection to cortisol is direct. Cortisol activates the sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for the fight or flight response. And one of the automatic outputs of that system is sweating. Not because the body needs to cool down, but because sweating is part of the threat response package. It happened before every confrontation your ancestors ever faced. The problem is that your body cannot distinguish between a real physical threat and a chronic psychological one. When cortisol is chronically elevated, the sympathetic nervous system stays in partial activation. Your body is never fully in fight or flight, but it's also never fully at rest. It's idling at a higher than normal level, and that elevated baseline can be enough to trigger sweating in calm situations, at rest, or during sleep. If you've been sweating in situations where it makes no sense and have already ruled out obvious causes, it's worth investigating your stress hormones. Now, this is probably the most underestimated sign on the list: fat accumulation at the back of the neck, and one of the most specific. Run your hand along the back of your neck, right at the base, where the neck meets the upper back. Is there a soft, noticeable pad of fat there? Something that feels different from the surrounding area and may have appeared or grown over the past few years without clear explanation? Clinically, this is called a dorsal fat pad, or colloquially, a buffalo hump. While it can have various causes, one of the most well-documented is prolonged cortisol elevation. Cortisol is one of the primary hormones that regulates fat distribution in the body. When levels are chronically high, the body not only stores more fat, It changes where that fat goes. The normal balanced distribution is replaced by a central redistribution pattern. Fat accumulates preferentially around the abdomen, the face, especially the cheeks, giving a rounder appearance, and the back of the neck. What makes this sign especially telling is the asymmetry it creates. The belly becomes rounder, the face fuller, the neck thicker, while the arms and legs remain relatively unchanged. This type of disproportionate, centralized weight gain, especially combined with other signs on this list, points strongly to cortisol. Now, most people know about stretch marks. They're common, generally harmless, and almost everyone has some, from growth spurts, pregnancy, or weight changes. But there is a specific type of stretch mark that looks different, wide purple stretch marks on the body. And it has a very different cause. Cortisol-related stretch marks tend to be wider than typical ones, deeper, and they often have a striking purple or violet color, rather than the silvery white or pinkish tone that most stretch marks eventually fade to. They can appear on the abdomen, hips, thighs, armpits, or arms, and may show up even without significant weight change. The mechanism comes back to collagen. Collagen is the structural protein that gives skin its elasticity, its ability to stretch and bounce back. When cortisol is chronically elevated, it suppresses collagen synthesis and accelerates its breakdown. The skin loses its resilience. It becomes less capable of handling any kind of stretching, even the small, everyday kind. When skin weakened by damaged collagen is stretched beyond what it can bear, it tears from within. That tear is the stretch mark. The vivid purple color comes from blood vessels, visible through the damaged and thinned skin. The same reason a fresh bruise is dark before it fades. Now that you know the signs, let's talk about what you can actually do. These are fundamental changes to the signals your body receives every day, and when applied consistently, they create measurable, lasting reductions in cortisol levels. Method 1. Improve sleep quality. Of all the levers you have to reduce cortisol, sleep is the most powerful and the most underestimated. Cortisol follows a precise daily rhythm. Under healthy conditions, it's at its highest in the first hour after waking. It's what gets you out of bed and keeps you functional in the morning. It then gradually declines throughout the day, reaching its lowest point in the early evening hours to allow for deep, restorative sleep. This rhythm is not optional. It's the master clock of your stress system, and poor sleep is the fastest way to break it. When you sleep poorly, whether due to too few hours, fragmented sleep, or inconsistent schedules, cortisol doesn't drop as it should at night. The next day starts from a higher baseline. That elevated baseline makes it harder to fall asleep the following night, which raises cortisol even further. The cycle worsens quickly. What truly helps isn't just sleeping more. It's going to sleep and waking up at the same times, including on weekends, because the cortisol rhythm is anchored to timing, not just duration. It means keeping your sleep environment cool, dark, and quiet, because even low levels of light or noise during sleep raise cortisol. It means creating a wind-down ritual of at least 30 to 60 minutes before bed, away from screens, because blue light suppresses melatonin and delays the cortisol drop your body needs. Method 2. Reduce excess. Sugar and caffeine. This one surprises people because neither sugar nor caffeine seem like stress, but both raise cortisol, and most people consume them in ways that keep cortisol chronically elevated without ever connecting the dots. Starting with sugar. Every time you consume a significant amount of refined sugar or fast-digesting carbohydrates, blood glucose spikes. Your body releases insulin to bring it back down. When that happens quickly, as with processed foods and sugary drinks, glucose can drop below normal. The body perceives this drop as a minor emergency. Cortisol is released to raise glucose again. Do that 3, 4, 5 times a day, which is normal on a standard Western diet, and your cortisol never fully drops between meals. Caffeine is more direct. It stimulates the adrenal glands to release cortisol. That's part of why it works as a stimulant. 1 cup in the morning, when cortisol is already rising naturally, rarely causes problems. But multiple coffees throughout the day, especially afternoon, prolong the cortisol elevation into the evening, directly interfering with the natural drop the body needs to prepare for sleep. The goal isn't elimination, it's reduction and timing. Limiting caffeine to the morning hours, cutting back on refined sugar, and swapping fast carbs for slow ones. Eating in patterns that keep blood glucose stable throughout the day. These aren't drastic changes, but the cumulative effect on cortisol is significant and measurable. Method 3. Daily walks and morning sunlight exposure. This is the method most people overlook. It seems too simple. It doesn't feel like an intervention. But the physiology behind it is among the most solid in stress research. Let's break it into two parts, because both matter separately, and together they're more powerful. First, the walk itself. Exercise and cortisol have a complicated relationship. High-intensity exercise, long runs, heavy lifting, intense cardio, significantly raises cortisol during and shortly after. For those who already have chronically elevated cortisol, this can make things worse. Low-intensity movement, however, does the opposite. A 20 to 30-minute walk at a comfortable pace activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, and reduces cortisol gently but measurably. It's one of the most reliable cortisol reduction tools available, and it only requires consistency. Second, morning sunlight. Your cortisol rhythm, that daily rise and fall we mentioned in Method 1, is directly regulated by your circadian clock. And the circadian clock is calibrated primarily by light, specifically by exposure to natural light in the first 1 to 2 hours after waking. When your eyes receive sunlight in the morning, they send a precise signal to the brain that anchors the entire cortisol cycle for the rest of the day. People who get consistent morning light exposure show more regular cortisol rhythms, better sleep, and lower baseline cortisol levels compared to those who spend their mornings under artificial indoor lighting. The effect is real, measurable, and free.